Okay. When I'm speaking at any places, it's trying to pick in songs, that kind of fit in or support or help us to understand. And God is a faithful one. And also in the song that we heard, there are names of God. And I've given you a word search, and you can do the word search if you like. But down on the right-hand side is a lot of names that are associated with God, either by name or by character, or by what he does. And I wonder if there's any names down there that maybe you never thought of God being that before. So if there is, you can shout it out if you want to shout out. If you don't want to shout out, then don't worry. There's quite a few. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. How many did Darren say last week? He said last week, how many did he say there were? Can you remember? Where's he gone? Oh, he's done a runner. Oh, good, he's done a runner. Well, he said, I think he said there were 7, and then it goes up to about 200 names of God, or characteristics of who God is and what God does. So I wonder how many times you've said or sung the Lord's Prayer during your lifetime. And when you did, well, I mean, we did it at school, in assemblies, no doubt most of you did too, because they don't do it anymore in schools. And you just use it as parrot fashion, don't you? We just, our Father who art in heaven. You don't really think about the words. And I was in a church on Monday, and they very rarely do the Lord's Prayer, so they miss out the blessing of what it's trying to say. But then some churches, they do it every week, and it's just, you do it as rote. And because you're just saying the words, and you actually wonder whether you're thinking about what you're actually saying or singing at the time. And so my responsibility this morning is the 4 words of hallowed be thy name. And hallowed means to reverence, to make holy, or to consecrate. And so when we come to God, we should approach him by his real name. And a name can identify a person of who they are and what they do. So if I gave you the name, say, Alexander Graham Bell, would you know who I was talking about? Yeah. Well, he's the fellow that instigated the doorbell, wasn't he? No, he was the instigator of the telephone, wasn't he? And it's come a long way since his first telephone with the wires and everything. I worked for BT for 18 years. And one day we were fitting a telephone in Leicester Causeway. And so you have to run a telephone wire from the telegraph pole to the house, and then you have to put a block, and then you have to run a wire from there to where the telephone's going. My boss turned around to me, he said, Terry, said, one day we will not need wires. I said, don't be stupid, because you'll need wires. But you don't need wires now, do you, for a telephone? And what amazes me, you can be in a car, driving along, talking to somebody, and they can hear you, unless you go down Camden Wedge, then the signal drops off. But most of the time, how does that work? How does that work that you're driving along, but then there's somebody in the car and they're on the phone, but you're picking up your signal and they're picking up their signal? I don't know. Do you know how prayer works? No, we don't. We just know that we talk to God, and he hears us. But the thing is, if I said David Beckham, anybody know who David Beckham is? Yeah, oh, there's a few nods. Yeah, there we go. Tim Henman. Yeah, okay. How about Ginger? Ginger? Pardon? Oh, Ginger Spice, yeah, okay, fine. How about Frog Spawn? You know Frog Spawn? As a name? Oh, don't you? Okay, yeah. Here we go. Speckled Hen? Yeah. Florence? Ozzy? Yeah. Tellboy? Tez? Mr. Osborne? All those names that I've just read from Ginger all the way through, I've been identified by as I've gone through life. Because when I was younger, I used to have ginger hair. It's all white now, but it used to be ginger. My name was Osborne, and I used to get called Frog Spawn at school, right? I've got a load of freckles, you can't see because of the suntan. I used to get called Speckled Hen because of all my freckles on my, I remember my proper name, or my full name, is Terence, okay, but I never get called Terence. And as I was probably 8 or 9, and my friend came round to call me, called to me, and he said to my dad, "Is Tez coming out to play?" Because I was known as Tez. And he said, "His name is Terence." Now, I never get called Terence. My dad didn't even call me Terence. Now, we identify people by names. Now, my wife's name is Rosemary. And when we were going out with each other, I've always called her Rosie, you see. And I called her one day, I said, "Rosie," and her dad said, "Her name is Rosemary." Well, okay, fine, okay. He stands at the bottom of the stairs one morning and he shouts, "Rowie, you coming down?" Because he used to go, "Oh, hang on, talk about you say one thing." But he was a dad, so he could do things, couldn't he, you know. But I've also been called an idiot and stupid and other such descriptions, but we'll go into that, won't go into that just this morning, you know. And as Darren mentioned last week, he's called by different names during his life, but there's one name that he didn't like. Can anyone remember what it was? Daz, yeah, don't.
It's hard not to.
What? I think it'll be if you start calling it. Yeah. But when you think about God, what name comes into your mind? When you think about God? Because the prayer begins, "Our Father." Can you relate to God as a loving father or a harsh father? Many people, and many maybe still do, equate God as to their relationship with their earthly father. And some people don't even know who their earthly father is. And so they find it difficult to relate to God as a father. And as we read through the Bible, God is known by different names at different times by different people. But he is the same God. And the Jews are reluctant to say the name of God or to spell it when they write it due to the third commandment: "Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God." And I've heard this before, but I googled it there. So when they write God, they put G-D as God, so they don't say the whole thing. So they do not misuse God's name in vain. As someone wrote, in all their encounters with Jews, they seem to make a point of not mentioning God's name. Instead, they vaguely refer to him as the Almighty, the One Above, or the Hashem, which I understand is to be the Hebrew name. The Hebrew for the name. When God asked Moses to go to Egypt to speak to the Israelites, Moses asked God what his name was. What did he say? "I am that I am. I am who I am." And God is who he is. God is supreme. He is the creator. He is the sustainer of the universe. And I'm just going to give you a list of names now about God, which I think we can focus on and think about. And I can never say that. Elohim, God is Elohim. He is your creator. God is our creator. He is the creator and the sustainer. Elohim Chaim, he is the living God. One that I mentioned last week is Abba. Abba means Father, Daddy, yes. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. Jehovah Shalom, the Lord is peace. El Elyon, the Lord Most High God. El Kanai, the jealous God. And El Roy, the God who sees. So the God that's got this name that we hallow, the name that we revere, the person that we come to, knows us, sees us, loves us, and cares for us. And all these names here identify a character of who God is, the creator, the living God, the one who provides the peace, the Most High God, the jealous God. And as I mentioned earlier, the name I got called was dependent on where I was and who I was with. And as you read through the Old Testament, you will find that God revealed himself and his name to different people and also to places. But if you're like me, today the name of God is not revered as it used to be years ago. And in Romans chapter 1, verse 21, it says these: "For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore, God gave them over to their sinful desires, to their hearts, to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised." And the worship today of God has been overtaken by the worship of self, who my name is, my identity, who I want to be. And so God said, if that's what you want, get on with it. But God doesn't turn his back on people. Though they dismiss his name, though they don't revere his name, they don't revere him as a person, God never turns their back. He said, okay, you go and do what you want. But if you want to repent and say, sorry, come back, I'm always here, ready to welcome you back. The story of the Good Samaritan portrays that the young man went off, he did his own thing, he wasted all his money, ended up in the pigsty. But when he went back, his father welcomed him back. And God is the same with us. We may have misused, we may have abused, we may have done awful things, but God welcomes us back the moment we say sorry. That he can be a father, he can be a God whom we can know and we can trust. But in today's society, there's not much reverence is shown to God these days, let alone his name. Years ago, you would not hear, and forgive me for saying this, OMG. You would not hear that on the radio, you would not hear it on TV, but now you hear it quite often. And I was watching do you know Annika Rice? She was doing a build program, and my wife said, let's watch this. And I watched it, and I had to turn it off after about 15 minutes. Every other sentence she opened her mouth, she'd be coming out, excuse me, coming out with that. And so, even if Christians complain about the abuse of God's name and the derogatory way of God's name, it just seems, well, you're a Christian, you're just going to be like that, so don't, and nobody worries about it. And I got Muslim friends, and I like Muslim friends, but if somebody does something against Muhammad, as soon as, it's getting in the press, it gets quashed and nobody does anything about it. Excuse me, I've got something in my throat. A few years ago, I remember, can I have a drink of water, please, if that's possible? A few years ago, I came down Arbery Avenue, and there was a big board on the wall, advertising board, and it was for Kit Kat. And it had got OMG, what a biscuit, or something like that, And I was quite upset and offended by it. So I wrote to the company and said, as a Christian, I find this quite offensive, and it upsets me to thanks, darling. And it upsets me to see this. And they said, well, yeah, but a lot of people are saying that kind of thing. I said, well, just because a lot of people are saying that means you've got to do it. And, true to their word, it wasn't just my letter, I think a lot of people complained about it as well. And so it was taken down, and you never see. And some people said, well, it's only God's name, what does it matter? It's a name to be hallowed. It's a name to be revered. Because God is, as I've said, our creator. He is our sustainer. And yet he wants to take time to be with us, to talk to us, to share with us. And we can know him as a father. And as we work through this prayer, which I believe is a framework as Jesus taught his disciples for prayer, then we won't know God, but we can know God better. Because if we know God, then we'll become like God, and we won't be like that. But we can know God better. If we spend time with people, we get to know them better. Like a few years ago, I'd heard of Darren, but I didn't really know him. But because we spent time together and we drink coffee together, not anything else, I don't like anything strong.
The wrong place.
And we do things together. You find out, like Katie, I didn't know Katie till I came here, but now I spend a bit of time with Katie. I know her a little bit more, and she knows me a little bit more. Dave and Anne, I didn't know them, 5-6 years ago? Well, I'm not going to know them anymore. Did you know they're on the move?
I heard a rumour.
Yeah, it's true, yeah. It was something I said. But anyway, God's name, going back to the name. I didn't mind some of the names I got called. I didn't like Frog Spawn so much, and I got called Ozzy. And then when my brother came to school, I got called Big Ozzy. And because I went to church, I got called Religious Ozzy. And so names identify. And when you mention a name, and so God's name is to be hallowed. God's name is to be revered. But God welcomes us to come to him. With our faults, with our failings, whoever we are, he says, come on, I've got time to sit and listen. And it is brilliant that, if I'm talking to Anne and Dave butts in, I have to listen to one or the other. But the thing is, with God, he can listen to everybody all the time. He's got time for everybody. But we need to make time for him. So as I said, when I went to school, because I did go to school at the time, senior school, we used to sing the Lord's Prayer. And Sarah's asked me if I would sing it this morning. So if it don't go well, it's Sarah's fault. Okay. And it goes like this. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. So when we say the Lord's Prayer, when we sing the Lord's Prayer, let's think that we are talking to the Creator God, the sustainer of all, who's got time for each of us with our idiosyncrasies, with our faults, with our failings. And he says, come, talk to me.